eats impure foods, ad achal kechatzi pras. He has to eat a half a pras, which is 2 eggs according to Rashi, because a pras is 4 eggs. Pras is a half a loaf of bread. Half a pras is a quarter of a loaf of bread. Is 2 eggs. So he has to eat double the size. That means that eating is weaker than the food itself. So that's why if someone eats a level 1, he only becomes a level 2. How are you going to make the one who's eating it like the food? It's weaker than the food because you have to eat more to become impure. Rabbi Lezer doesn't learn the impurity, the level of impurity from the measurement. This is the measurement that's for specific reasons. That doesn't tell us anything about the level of impurity. V'oid, another thing is, Lidvarecha, according to you, Shata. Now, Rabbi Les is going to get into the inconsistencies here. He says, according to you, Shata Imer al Rishon Sheni, Yafata Imer. Your logic is that when you eat something, you go down a level of impurity. You eat a number 1, you become a number 2. But Sheni, Lama. Why does someone that eats a 2 become a 2? Amalai. So Rabbi Shua says back, Matzinu Sheni Yisa Sheni Alidei Mashkin. See, we said that there was a decree on hands that they become a sheni. And that's why we have to wash our hands, because it could make truma impure. So that type of decree was also put on liquids, but not that all liquids become not a second, but become a first. Mashkin become tchilas. They become a rishon latama. And the reason is because they could be confused with the liquids that come out of an impure person, or zav, and which.
Does that mean that when we're doing it in Salam before bread, it's because we're considering it kaidesh or truma?
Yeah. Because of truma, because the breads. That's why specifically breads. In it could be for liquid. Truma, it would be by grain. So we do. That's why we wash for breads. What about wine and oil? Truma is by wine and oil. It says, well, usually you hold that in a cup, so we didn't make a decree on that. So it's really a decree just off truma breads, grains.
And shloimah
Washington? Yeah, that's what it says. Eruvin and in Chacham B'ni something, Yismach Libi Ramani something.
Why would he have washed if he wasn't a Kohen?
It was an institution. They instituted that to wash the hands before. I don't know if it was for everyone. I don't know for the decree that everyone washes or something, but that the hands are always considered secondary. That was an early institution, but then it was put back by Bishamai. Okay. So liquids become a first level of impurity. So sometimes it's possible that secondary impurity foods could make other foods of secondary impurity if there was liquid in the middle, because the liquids are considered a first level of impurity. Now, this is like it's not the food that's making it a second level, it's the liquid that's making it. But because sometimes we find that a secondary level of impurity food would make a first level of impurity, a liquid a first level of impurity, which in return would then proceed to make the next food a second level. We see a second level of impurity makes a second level of impurity. So Amalai, but the liquid itself is the first level of impurity.
So it goes up.
So I think what Rabbi Eliezer is asking is, so why do you make him a second level of impurity? You should consider it like a liquid, which becomes a first level of impurity. Right? Why doesn't it go back? Why doesn't it go back to being a first? Ditanan, as it was taught, kol hapaisel b'truma. Anything that would make truma into a third level, meaning anything that's a second level of impurity, like hands or something. Metam mashkin liyas tchila. That makes liquids into a first level. Chutz mitvol yain. except for someone that went to the mikvah already but needs to wait for the nightfall. So his question over here is, why are you considering a secondary level of tumah? If someone eats a secondary level of tumah, that he becomes a secondary level of tumah. If you're concerned about liquids, he should go back to being a first level of tumah, because liquids become a first. And he goes on, he says, Void shlishi sheni lama. Why does a third level of impurity go back to being a second level of impurity? Amalai, afani lo yamarti ela b'truma. I only said that a third level of impurity goes back to being a second level of impurity. That's only if we were keeping this at a level of purity for truma. Shetarasa, that pure truma, Tamei Yetzel Kodesh, is considered impure regarding things that are sacrificial. So, in other words, he doesn't mean that eating a third level of tumah takes it back to a second level. What it means is that it was really never pure on its own right anyway for these things, for Kodesh. It was only held to a purity standard for Truma. Truma is what's given to the Kohen, but Kodesh is what's brought as a sacrifice. That's held to a higher standard. So even things that are considered pure for Truma are still considered impure for Kodesh.
If something's a Risha and a Sheni or Shlishi, it's not really relevant, because in one, it's all not good. The nafkamina is, can it make something else? Right? So that's why it's important to know whether it's a Risha, Sheni, or Shlishi. So when he says that everything's a Sheni, it's basically saying not that it's better or worse than a Rishon or a Shlishi, but that it has the ability to make something else.
Off, right. Right. So that would be the logic. However, he gives a different reason for every step of it. Instead of giving the one reason, he gives... That's why it's hard to know in these conversations if this is really their full opinion. I know there's a Mishnah in Pesachim I'm learning with my son that's really Rabbi Shua and Rabbi Eliezer. The logic is so clear, but the conversation is so peripheral to what the real subject that they're discussing. So, Amar Reb Zera. Reb Zera now says, Amar Rabasi, Amar Rabbi Yechon, Amar Rabbi Yanai. Well, this is a long tradition. Reb Zera says the name of Rabasi, in the name of Rabbi Yechon, and the name of Rabbi Yanai. That ha'oichel shlishi shel chulin shnasu al taras hakodesh nasa gufi sheni lakodesh. If someone eats a third level of impurity, but it was mundane food. But it was mundane food that was kept to the level of sanctity of a sacrifice. So his body becomes a secondary level. Okay. This sounds very good. This sounds like it fits with Rabbi Yeshua. However, there's one problem. We said that it was mundane food that was kept to the level of sanctity of a sacrifice. When we actually read Rabbi Yeshua inside, he only says this by mundane food that's kept to the level of truma. So Esri Reb Zera le Rabasi. Reb Zera asked to Rabasi, he's the last on the list over here, so he asked to the one that said it over. Shlishi sheni lakodesh, that a third level of impurity makes the person a secondary level of impurity for sanctified food, vein sheni le truma, but not for truma. And when do we say this? That's bechul shenasu al taras truma. That's only for that mundane food that's kept to the level of purity for truma. Al taras truma in, al taras kodesh lai. Rabbi Shua didn't say this by taras kodesh. Amalei, he responds, Lemi Bai Kamar. He says that he said it by Truma, but he meant to say even by Truma, not only by Kodesh. That's exactly the opinion of Ula before. The problem is that in the conversation that was quoted by Rabbi Bar Bachana, he says, I only say this by Truma, that truma becomes a secondary level of impurity, a third level of impurity, truma, that gets eaten. The person becomes a secondary level of impurity. For kodesh, that's because the third level of impurity for truma is actually not considered pure at all for kodesh, which means that Rabbi Yeshua was only talking about things that were kept to the level of purity for truma, but not for kodesh. That's Rabbi Bar Bachana's opinion, that Rabbi Yeshua wasn't talking about things that were kept to the level of Kodesh. So the Gemara responds to this It says, Amirai Nenu, Bali B'der Rabbi Yochanan. There's two opinions of how Rabbi Yochanan said this. There's the opinion of Ula, or there's the opinion of Rabasi, who agrees with Ula, and there's the opinion of Rabbi Bar Bachana, that this last part of the conversation, does this apply to foods that were kept to the sanctity of sacrificial foods, or maybe it's only to foods that were kept to the sanctity of truma. Amar Ula. Ula says, "Ha'eichel shlishi shel chulin shenaser al taras truma nifsal gufa milechel b'truma." Someone that eats a third level of impurity, of mundane food that's kept to the level of truma, his body becomes the level of his body becomes a secondary level, and he can't eat truma now. And if he does, the truma becomes nifsal. It becomes impure to the level that it can't impart impurity, but it itself is impure. The Gemara says, "My kamashmalan, I need Ula to tell me this." Ula is, I guess, a third generation Amayra. Tanina, I have a Mishnah that says this. Shlishi is a sheni lakodesh, ve'ein sheni letruma, b'chulin shenaser al taras truma. A third level of impurity becomes the second level. If he eats a third level, he becomes the second level of impurity for kodesh, but he doesn't become a second level of impurity for truma. And this is referring to chulin that was kept to the level of truma. We say sheni hu d'loi havi. He doesn't become a secondary level for truma. Ha shlishi havi, but he does become a third level. That means that if someone eats a third level of truma, would become a third level. No, but we said before that he becomes a secondary level to impart. So what we meant before is that he becomes a shlishi. That he shouldn't be. He becomes a shlishi for truma.
So you can't eat truma, but you can touch it.
Right. Very good. He could. That means that he can't eat truma, but he could still touch it because he's a shlishi. He can't make truma impure because the shlishi doesn't make truma impure, but he still can't eat it. Special. Okay. So we're medayik that for truma he doesn't become a second level, but that sounds like he becomes a third level if he eats a third level. Gemara says from that Mishnah I wouldn't have known because I would have thought that he's nothing. In this, that it says that he becomes the second level of, and because it says he becomes the second level for holiness, we say that he's not a sheni for truma, but we really mean to say he's not a sheni or a shlishi. It comes along Ula, it says if he eats a third level of impurity for truma, he becomes a third level of impurity, and he can't eat truma, but he could touch it. Kamash Milan, that's what this teaches us. Esri Rav Hamnuna asks Ula, Harishain shebechulin tamei umetame. If something is a rishon of chulin, and that touches something else, so that makes the next thing impure, and that next thing could also go on. The secondary thing could go on to make something else impure if it would be truma. Bahasheni, but if it's a second level of chulin, secondary level, that could only make truma pasul. Ve'ina matame, it doesn't make it tame. The difference between pasul and tame is pasul means that it becomes tame, and tame means that it can give off tame as well. So va'ashlishi, but if it's a third level of impurity, nechel b'nezir adema, that could be eaten with spices of truma. Now v'i'amrit nifsal gufa milechel b'truma, if we say that someone that eats a third level of impurity is not allowed to eat truma, safin le'midi de pasul le'gufei. Are we going to feed him something that he's not allowed to eat? It says he's allowed to eat the spices. So Amalei, he responds to this. These spices will never become a prohibition because he's never going to be able to eat the right amount of these truma spices in the combination of food that he's eating. Okay.
No, they have no spices.
Very good.
Video.
You're asking around.
Ask me a good morning.